3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. I'm at Helinski. We're on location here at the Hall of Fame, as you can tell. Look at these photos here. If the walls and the photos could talk, we'd have lots of stories. But indeed, we have another great story here today. 1988 Hall of Famer, the one and the only, often imitated, never duplicated, Stan Rusin. Stan, good to catch up with you, man. We've asked many, many times, and we're pleasantly surprised that you're even here today. I know you're a very personal and private person when it comes to some things. How you doing these days?
Very well. Retired and enjoying life.
And you're back here in Tonawanda.
Yes.
For those of you who are not aware of your football and career exploits, give us a rundown. Give us a little basic on growing up in Tonawanda and how you got involved with athletics.
Oh gosh. In our day, makes it sound ancient, but we were out of the door at 9 in the morning and maybe stopped back for lunch and came home when the street lights came on. We played sports in the street, the parking lot of Ukrainian Hall, which is now a church, and every sport imaginable. We shoveled driveways off to play basketball. We went to Gilmore School area, which used to be flooded, behind Memorial Pool, shoveled that off and played ice hockey. We played what they'd call corkball or baseball on the side of Gilmore School. We'd have 5 guys or 6 guys, 3 on a team. We'd draw a strike zone on the bricks. There'd be a pitcher's outs, 1 infielder, and right field was closed. If you hit it to right field, you were out. We found ways, basketball, hockey, soccer, football on the side of Gilmore with those huge maple trees. My dad made it to AAA level in baseball as a catcher when he got out of the service. And he always steered me towards baseball. And he always wanted me to be a pitcher because pitchers made the most money. So he would sit down in the crouch and catch. We'd be in the backyard until my arm fell off. And it's okay, 3 more strikes, and okay, we'll go swimming in Memorial Pool. And tried my hardest, and boom, I'd throw a worm burner, get through them, and it would roll all the way to my grandfather's house. I'd be like, oh my gosh. Because he'd walk slowly, and then he'd come back, and he'd fire a 95-mile-an-hour strike at my head, and it was. But I moved to catcher, and had a knack for that. Played, first Little League team was Kruger Mobile, and then played like 5 years with the Gratwick Hose Yankees. And Al Kornacki was my coach. Fantastic man. I went out for football maybe in 1968 for Tyro, but I was a very late bloomer size-wise. And they had so many guys out, they said, well, come back next year. You're just too light. I was on a 90-pound team, but I only weighed 75 or 60 pounds. So my freshman year, I played at Bishop Gibbons in 1970. They did not have enough guys for freshmen, so they combined and I played JV. And still then, this was the last year the school was open. The school records will show at my physical, I was the 5 foot, I wasn't even 98 pounds. 90 pound, 5 foot 90 pound weakling. But I stuck in there. And I don't know, it was because they didn't have the numbers or I just wouldn't quit. That was something that was drilled in me. If you were going to do something, you were going to do it right. And reverting back to Tyro was the next season. Because I got banged around pretty good at Gibbons. So I was so small, I was able to go out for Tyro, and this was when I was a sophomore. And this was the 125 pound team. So as a sophomore, I was 120 pounds. And Jerry Sullivan and John Chase were some of the greatest coaches I ever had. Technique-wise, I learned so much from them as being a lineman. The footwork for an influence block, just as soon as your stance, as soon as the ball was snapped, slide 1 foot a half inch back, other out, boom, you've got that natural angle to take a guy this way or that way. Just so much technique and mental part of the game and the intensity. And about the 4th game of the season, since I was a new guy, they're like set players. The kid got hurt and they called me in, and then they couldn't get me off the field. Played both ways, offensive guard, linebacker. Then I had, from my Gibbons experience, Paul Camara and Jim Hurtubise were my coach. And Paul Camara wanted to cut me because I was so small. But then again, I hung in. We maybe had 23 guys on the team. It's one of my proudest photos. I'm number 52 with a leather helmet, standing next to Joe Jastrzemski, who was like all Tyro everything. And like one of my mentors in high school. And then between like my sophomore and junior year, I grew 8 inches and 80 pounds. And all of a sudden I wasn't the class punching bag anymore. They go, ooh. Preceding myself, before that, I'm going into NT now as a junior, and still small, 5'3", 135 pounds, 5'4". And I decided to play JV because NT just had, they were monsters. The Urbana brothers, the Eichler brothers, the Hole brothers. And I said, there was about 5 of us from Gibbons that were juniors that played JV that year, because we probably wouldn't have made the team. There was so many guys out at NT, and everybody was 6 foot, 220 pounds. And so the first day of practice of contact, my coaches were Franny Burke and Lefty Greida, who was a physics teacher. Lefty was a Navy veteran, and he had 4 arms like huge softball bats with the Navy tattoos on, had a brush cut, and he was all business. He reminded me of Seebeck a little bit. And we, first day of contact, we had a thing called board drills, where they pulled out these 8-foot 2x10s. One guy was on his back at the other end, or both guys were laying on their back. Coach blew the whistle. You ran and hit in the middle and see who could push each other off the board. I remember Franny Burke telling me, he goes, wow, we didn't think you were nothing, special, but first day at board drills, you were just killing it. You were just, boom, you were up first, down the line, hitting low, square, perfect. And we had about 60 guys on the team. And they decided to 2-platoon. And I think Jerry Sullivan called the coaches and said, you know, you might want to consider, you know, I know Stan's playing offensive guard for you and doing a good job, but I go, he could really help your defense. My coaches used to come to my future games. John Chase was on my sideline on my JV game, and we played Tonawanda. And my coach said, who is that guy? Because he was yelling at me every day. Come on, Rusin, stay low, keep your head down, keep focused. It was, and the Tyro team, sorry to jump around, but just a bunch of great guys. The two best players we had were Rick Kania and Billy Janowski. Rick Kania was like a brown belt in Taekwondo, and Billy Janowski, just a fantastic athlete and running back, and they equally were both tough. When they would do their version of board drills, one guy would carry the ball, one guy would tackle, and the impacts that they made. And Kania always growled when he tackled. He hit you and he it was, you know, I'm getting goosebumps here, but. So played for Franny Burke and Lefty Grida. About the second game of the season, I don't know, because of injury or not living up to the performance of Lefty, he called the team together and he said, I know we said we're 2-platooning, but we're going to have some guys on offense play defense. So Jimmy Weber, who I think was playing flanker at the time, and QB, went to defensive back, and I moved to middle linebacker. And we won 5 games in a row, and we lost our last game to Sweet Home, like 28-22 in a mud bath. And Sweet Home thought they had the game wrapped up with about 4 minutes left, beat up by about 12, and they put all clean jerseys in. My offensive line mates, I played next to Jerry Fries for 3 years. The kid would not say a word. He would just shut up and play. And probably tough as nails. Randy Zeromi was next to me, my center. Next to him was Joey Ogiba, pound for pound. All 3 years I played with Joey, toughest athlete I've ever met. And next to him was John Greth. And again, all John did was play. If he got beat on a block, he'd come back and cut you on the other side. He never gave up, which was just the way we were taught to play. It was fantastic. So I had my growth spurt, and I, again, popped up 8 inches and 80 pounds from like 5'4", like 135, 140 to 6 foot 210. All of a sudden, wow, class punchy bag now is bigger than the punchers. And it's like,
let me ask you something. You were also at that point, the school had gotten its first universal gym.
Right.
And you were very religious about it from what I remember.
Oh yeah.
You were there. If the place could be open 7 days a week, you would have been there.
That was because of Franny Burke. Franny Burke took me under his wing when I played for him on JV, and he would always call me Stosh. And hey Stosh, what you doing? Hey, he goes, oh, we're getting some equipment, and they did not have a weight program at NT until that year. Right after the fall season, they purchased Universal Gym, and they put it by a auxiliary lunchroom on the first floor, and Franny opened the weight room every day from like 3 o'clock when we got out to like 5:30, and he saw that and he introduced me to it, and he showed me how to, and if I did not work out, I felt I was letting him down. And I would work out if I was banged up, if I was sick, if I just was there, and that I think helped my growth spurt, because I didn't just grow long and heavier. I strength-wise, Franny pushed me to the limit, and the results showed. And I kept that through my that was my junior and senior year. Between my junior and senior year, the spring of my senior year, actually I played an extra year because I switched curriculums. I was in the BOCES program, and then I went into college entrance, because after my first varsity season, I started getting stacks of letters from colleges. I'd come into homeroom and I'd have, all these questionnaires and feelers from schools, if I was interested in, extending in my football career, interested in a scholarship. And I said, well, I can't do that if I'm, in like the technical end of the school. So I talked to Principal Shepard, and he agreed that was a good decision, and they allowed me to go an extra year, which turned out to be my senior year, the year we won the championship with Coach Ramsey, Coach Williams, Coach Tedder, Anastasi. John Chisera and Fran Burke were the JV coach, but we all practiced together.
What were the coaches, what did they, when they saw you in that growth spurt during that time period, what were their thoughts, and did they have visions of grandeur, what they could do with you and where they would play you?
Starting, my first year as a over 6-footer, Coach Ramsey thought that, well, since we had so many guys, we were going to 2-platoon. And we had a scrimmage, and unbeknownst to my knowledge, most of my teammates went to Warmington bowling alley the night before, and let's say they weren't ready to play the scrimmage. And
they were known as the Warmington Cowboys, weren't they?
They were something. And Ramsey was so upset with us. He called practice off on Monday. On Tuesday, he ran us till our tongues hung out. And he goes, that's for all you guys that were at Warmington. And he goes, if this ever happen again, there's going to be notes on the locker saying, thank you for your service, no longer needed. And as we're getting close to the season, and I think Franny Burke and Jerry Sullivan had some input and said, Stan Rusin played for me, and he never left the field, and he did not lose a step. So don't be afraid of using him both ways. Well, Coach Ramsey had 3 guys to go both ways. I was playing offensive center at the time, center and guard, and he left me at guard and then moved me to middle linebacker, outside linebacker. And we started to improve. And, as a team, the best memories I have were the guys at practice, the guys that didn't see that much game time, but they were there every day knocking heads with us and trying their best. Guys like Pete Sarratori, Andy Lucas, who Chuck Ramsey honored at our banquet, saying, you know, he got his letter, didn't see much action, but I don't think he's missed a day of practice in 4 years. Randy Zaromi, just super guys, and didn't see much playing time, but you were going against them every day, and they gave it their whole heart. And that's what I cherish the most. Our group of linemen who played together for 3 years. And then my senior year, Johnny Laper, John Montesani came up. And Chuck Williams used to say, you know, water covers 2/3 of the world. Rusin, Laper, and Montesani cover the other third. Because we just swarmed to the ball. We were like rabid. And we beat Kenmore West, who defeated the number 1 team in the state, which was Sweet Home, the week before, and they were ranked number 1. It was on a Thursday night, and it was Hall of Fame night, and this was I think the first class that was inducted. And Dave Anastasi and John Matowski were there, and they got inducted. And I had went to John. John was our trainer at Gibbons. Jerry Whitehead was our equipment manager. My first helmet I got, inside of it said Snake. I go, it's not Snake Stabler. They go, no, that's Snake Matecki. Snake Matecki the year before was a quarterback and tight end he had a triple bar with no, the guys that living in NT and the experiences, but we ended up, we had to make some defensive changes at halftime. We had them tied 14-14 at half. And
you're talking about Sweet Home.
No,
Kenmore West.
I'm sorry. Kenmore East.
Kenmore East.
The Bulldogs. So, now Joe Yogiba was a fantastic athlete. He lettered in basketball, baseball, football, but the gods did not bless him with size. He was maybe 5'9", 5'10", at the heaviest, maybe 160. Joey played like 9 positions for us on offense and defense. For the Kenmore East game, he went up against their all-state receiver, Bobby Yan, and like shut him down. And there's one play on, thanks to Scooch and you getting our films on YouTube, where I had blitzed and rushed the quarterback. They threw a quick out to Yan. Joey Ogiba hit him, drove him back 8 yards, but didn't finish the tackle. He shook loose, but I was taught at a very early age, never give up, play to the whistle. So I saw the ball thrown, I faded over there, I saw Joey pushing him back, but still running in that direction, and he shook loose and he broke off, cut in the middle, and I had a full head of steam, and it was a huge 4 minutes left in the game, like 3rd and 9, and I dropped him right at the line of scrimmage, and dropped him pretty good. We slid out of bounds for about 5 yards. It was, TNT was always pumped up, always excited. Played like Clint Small's last game, and all of Tonawanda they had white helmets. They had "Kill NT" written on all their helmets. I was like, okay, like half our guys couldn't read anyways. But we ended up beating them in a rainstorm, Tonawanda, we're leading 7-0. Tonawanda scored with like 2 minutes left, and Clint Small says, "Well, I'm not going." Back then there was no overtime, so Clint Small went for 2. It was a fake PAT, and we were able to stop that, and we squeaked that one out 7-6. We had beaten Kenmore East in Jamestown, and we were coming into the Tonawanda game. Everybody thought we'd be hungover, and we had a 14-0 lead at half, and Jimmy Weber bid on out and up, and they scored on a 60-yard pass. But then after that, the quiet man that played next to me, Jerry Fries, all of a sudden somebody lit a fire in him, and he's screaming, "Come on, let's go!" And I never heard a peep from him through the whole game. Joe Yogiba used to reach over and grab his face mask during the games. And, "Fred, you start blocking, I'm going to knock the crap out of you." Okay. And I mean, a gentle giant. He was the strongest guy in the weight room, and they were going to try him at nose guard, but he just didn't have that killer instinct. But as an offensive tackle, I mean, he gave it his best all the time.
Besides Franny Burke, and who were some of the other influential coaches, or maybe some teachers that influenced you growing up, and maybe in the high school era as well too?
Oh, okay. Coaching wise, like Chuck Williams, he taught me the intensity. He used to write me when I was in college, because after my freshman year, I hit the weights real hard, and I was introduced to free weights, and I put on about 20 pounds of really good muscle. And since my motor ran high all the time, the coaches wouldn't let me scrimmage because they were afraid I was going to hurt a starter. So, I was not getting disillusioned, but it was less fun not to be involved at every play and every practice. And Chuck wrote me and he said, "Stick to it." George Tedder, fantastic. He was one of the classes of the Hall of Fame. Taught German, and a super technician. I think he made all league as a center or offensive guard. John Witowski, my physical therapist, was just amazing, but you had to put up with his lousy jokes. Because he'd treat 6 people at once. I'd be sharing a whirlpool with a 70-year-old lady. This is Mrs. Fashinsky. She used to play tuba in the band. Oh gosh, Chuck Ramsey, one of the best coaches I ever had. He taught, and he never had to yell and scream. He knew how to communicate. Dave Anastasi, again, with the intensity, and you could just see the fire in his eyes. Again, Franny Burke, I wouldn't be anywhere without Coach Burke. And until his passing, I still called him Coach. And he goes, "Stas, you don't have to call me Coach." He goes, "Yeah, call me Franny, call me, I said, "Coach, you earned it." I said, "You'll always be Coach to me." And we all got together for his 75th birthday party in Grand Island at his son's house. Mark Ciesica, John Laper, Snake Matecki, Joe Yogiba. If we weren't practicing, we were working for the city rec department. And that was Franny would have us, he would run PAL basketball, which started at 9, but he wanted us there at 8. And we would run gassers and wind sprints in the gym before we had to, referee or, keep score. And then he got us into lifeguarding, and then we all worked at Memorial Pool. Then even afterwards, just playing basketball with him at their Waters, and you would see him, you would see his green Jeep or green Ford pickup with a white cap on it, parked at the last spot at Wrazin, and he would be running the track. He had this thing he called the 300s. Do 300 push-ups, do 300 sit-ups, and do 3 miles of running a day. And he did that religiously. You would always see his truck there. Every day you'd drive by at the same time, 8, 9 in the morning, his truck, only car there in the summer. And you'd see him running around, and he didn't have a sweatsuit, but he would use like Glad trash bags and cut holes in the arms and tape his arms up so he would get this workout. He was just phenomenal.
Talk about your recruiting for college. You end up going to Mesa College in Colorado. Were there other schools that were interested in you? And by and large, why the decision to go to Colorado?
I had what I thought was a nice offer from Canisius. Their coach came over, they explained everything. He said, Stan, it won't cost you a dime, we've got everything covered. But somehow that fell through. He failed to mention that he had taken a student loan out in my name. So I did receive a couple calls from Syracuse, but their policy was if you make the team and if you're fourth string, you've got a quarter scholarship. Third string, you got 50%. Second string, 75. First team, you're full ride. Rice University in Texas was on the phone with me. But when I looked them up and I saw like the average temperature in Texas, like 120 degrees in the summer, I'm like, ah. And then out of the blue, I hear from this, I get this express letter from Mesa College. As it turned out, my math teacher, Sandra Dempsey, whose husband was big in athletics in the Buffalo area in Grand Island, came to one of our games and said, wow, this kid's got something. Is he going anywhere to school? And Sandra told him, no, we don't think so, nothing yet. Well, the problem was Chuck Ramsey was a teacher in Tonawanda. All the letters were coming to NT. So there was a communication problem with it. And then when they would request films, sometimes he didn't get the letters. And back then, sending film, okay, you send the films out to one school, another school calls and wants film. You got to either call an opponent, can you lend us some film? And I mean, it was not like today where you could just, click on a mouse and, see. Well, now they have, my friend, athlete from Grand Island runs a company that gets kids into college. He'll make video portfolios of their accomplishments and tape them at meets or games. So he called, and at the time, the season before, they were a junior college and they were nationally ranked. And they had a great coach, Jack Perna. They were going to a 4-year program. So I was like one of the first true freshmen to go there. But the decision was, and they got a hold of me late. And he asked for he said, I've been highly recommended as a prospect. Can you please send film as soon as possible? And he even sent money to send the films. So Coach Ramsey sent the East film and a couple other films. And he was calling my dad at work every day. well, is your son, have you decided where you're going to send him? My dad, if he ain't picking a school, he's going in the Marines. So Coach Perna sends, we have a knock at the door, and there's a courier, a messenger with a letter, and it's addressed to my dad. And it's offering my dad a full scholarship. So we called the coach and said, Coach, you made a slight error. He said, we'll get that right out to you. So I signed with them, and I never looked back. Freshman years was tough because I knew 0 people. But after the first couple practices, I got to be lifelong friends with a lot of good guys I played 4 years with.
Was it eye-opening that the competition was a lot more intense, and you had a lot of good players on your as teammates on that Mesa College team?
I was always coached to be intense, so it might have been up a notch, but the athletic ability was eye-opening. Guys, instead of running 4.9 40s, were running 4.5 40s. 300-pound bench pressers were benching 500 pounds. So, if Coach Burke always said, it's not always the biggest, the strongest, and the fastest guy who wins the battles. It's the smartest guy. So a lot of times I'd be going up against guys 60 or 70 pounds heavier, but I knew how to chop block. And back in the day, that was allowed. So pass blocking, I set up high and go low. My ears were ringing for days from head slaps and this and that, but my guy never got through. I took care of business. I started off as an offensive guard, and then there was an injury on defense to one of our defensive ends. And we went to play Colorado College, and they were one of the last teams in the U.S. that ran the single wing. And they had these 2 monster tackles, 270, 280, that would pull on every play. And I had come into camp at Mesa underweight. I had actually had my tonsils out in like April, and I lost like 20 pounds because I couldn't eat. So I did get that weight back, but we were in practice that week, and the drill was our coach would send 2 offensive linemen out to block 1 guy. And our job was either to try to split them, to take 1 out, or to take both out. And after doing the drill 3 times, I had concussed 3 guys. And coach said, I think I found myself a defensive end. Jack they said he was a better hunter and fisherman than a coach, but he was like all-state in Missouri. He was in the medical books because back then they didn't have face masks, and he had all 4 front of his teeth kicked out on one play, and he finished the game. And they tried this new procedure to anchor teeth in, and he was. I learned more about intensity from him because if somebody made a mistake, he would cuss, and he would have a clipboard. He would fire that clipboard into the ground. It would snap, and his teeth would come half out. Run it again, and. As freshmen, it was pretty intense. Our first team meeting, we're 90 guys sitting in a room, just all freshmen and sophomores, and he came in, and he had this skin-tight black T-shirt on. He's smoking a Swisher Sweet cigar. Gets up at the podium. Says, "We got one rule here. I'm the boss. If you don't like it, there's the door. And, everybody's like shivering, shaking. Now, getting through that and the off-weight programs, and we added some really good guys on the coaching staff. We got a guy named Joe Clune, who coached for Frank Cush at Arizona State. Joe Clune was on the 1961 National Championship LSU Tigers. Well, they used to be called the Chinese Bandits. And he played with Billy Cannon. And on road trips, I would sit up near him by the bus just to hear his stories. When Frank Cush took over the Indianapolis Colts, he hired Joe as a coach and a scout. And I still kept in contact with him until his passing. He would write me at the Denver camp, and it was, he was one of the good guys. We had another coach, Polish guy, who was from Chicago, and it reminded me of Joe Yogi, but went to Nebraska. And he was one of the few white players on Nebraska, undersized, but he was like Joey. He never gave up. They'd have him on drills. Boom. They go, hey, little white boy kicked your butt. And they'd bring another guy in, big stud in, and boom, hey, he'd get head slapped, this and that, but he never got to the quarterback. He had 4 seconds to get from through your guy to touch the quarterback.
You made a few all-league teams during your college years. Were the pros taking a look at you at that point? Were they sniffing around and seeing what you got and if you had the goods to play at the next level?
When I was a sophomore, we had a kicker named Craig Snyder. And he was like a freak of nature. He was about 6'5", 270 pounds, and he was a kicker. And when we would go for extra points, he'd kick the ball out of the stadium and into the street. And I mean, every kick was out of the end zone, but under pressure, he was not that effective. And 5 different teams came out to scout him. Now, I snapped for extra points and field goals. So the coach would say, Stan, and then the holder would go over and we'd go with these pro scouts. And they're looking at me, I'm now 6'3", 235 pounds. Oh, what year are you? Oh, I'm a sophomore. Oh, what's your name? So somehow when my name got out there, a kid from Hamburg came there my junior year, and his name was Kevin Jones. His dad was Stan Jones of the Chicago Bears, and he was coaching with Denver with Joe Collier, who were on Buffalo's staff, and they were good friends of Nick Seebeck. And
Small world.
Small world. And in fact, when I went for my tryout for Denver, Joe Collier called Nick Seebeck and talked to him for about 45 minutes about me. Oh, what was he like in class? What was he like in school? This, And Seebeck said, hey, he gives it his all. He's not a quitter. He's one of the best we've had.
You finish up at Mesa and undrafted. You go to camp with the Denver Broncos. That team had Randy Gradishar, Tom Jackson, Lyle Alzado, Craig Morton as the quarterback, Haven Moses as the wide receiver,
Otis Armstrong, Rick Upchurch.
Were you starstruck by all of this? And what were your thoughts going through all of that, Stan?
It's the year before they were in the Super Bowl. And I'm like, wow. And they all had their AFC championship rings, which their owner bought them, but they didn't have their Super Bowl ring. That was the cherished, that was the thing that they really wanted. Just watching and learning. Randy Gradishar pulled a tendon in his foot, and he was out, and I used to work out with him. We'd go early in the morning, and he played at Ohio State with a kid from Lewiston Porter named Tom Blinko.
Tom Blinko, yes.
And we shared stories and that I had played against Tom for like 2 years, once on JV and once on varsity. And I mean, Tommy was the real deal. He was a stud. He was one of Woody Hayes's kickoff team. What did they call them? The Wedge Busters. And that was quoted in Sports Illustrated. That Coach Hayes's Wedge Busters, Tom Blinko, and this other guy, Bob Brzezinski, which I had a chance to play with when I was in Miami.
Your kamikaze squads, that's what they were known as.
Yeah, but they called them the Wedge Busters. Their job was to go find the wedge and take out as many guys as they could. So it was.
So what was that camp like? And I know you got into you played in a preseason game. You probably thought you had a shot at making the Broncos and maybe the taxi squad back then.
Well, too, I besides playing inside and outside linebacker, I was snapping for punts, field goals, and extra points. So at the time, the rosters were smaller and coaches didn't have the luxury of just carrying a long snapper. But I was definitely in the running for that. All the punters loved, I could really fire the ball back there, and it was always right there, right at their chest in like 0.5 seconds. So ended up getting hurt in practice and damaged an ankle pretty bad. And Coach Miller came up to me.
Red Miller,
yeah.
He was the Turk, wasn't he? Or he give you the bad news, and probably the equipment manager was the Turk.
Well, after I got hurt, he came up to see me in the hospital, and he goes, "Damn it, Stan! I thought you were too tough to get hurt, you know." And there was cut down days, and then actually one of the assistant coaches, my linebacker coach, knocked on my door and said, "Yeah, Coach needs to see you. Bring your book." So I went into it, and they had like 4 other guys with me, and one was the NFL player rep. And in those days, if you were injured in camp, you had 2 options. You could go on the injured reserve for the year and receive your full salary, but you had to be at every practice. You couldn't be on the field with the team, but you would be at every practice for rehab. Or you could take what was called an injury settlement. So I was like 6 hours short of my degree. So I decided to take the injury settlement, go back to Mesa, finish my degree, and I was hired as an assistant coach under Jack Perna under his last year, and I got to coach defensive end linebackers. I also worked with the punters and the snappers. At Mesa, we would have contests. We had just such a great bunch of guys my junior, senior year. And like there were 7 or 8 like high school punters, so we would like line up. And the field house was like 8 stories high. We'd line up 50 yards away from there and see who could get closest to the field house. And one time you'd get a hold of one and it would hit the wall of the field house. And so my senior year, senior year, I was also backup punter and kicker. And I did get into a couple games. Our junior year, we were fantastic. We were 8-1-1, and we tied for the league championship. in the RMAC. And we lost one game by 1 point. And we should have never, it shouldn't have been that close, but we were playing like the 4-time league champion Western State, and they had like 106 guys on their team. My freshman year, they spanked us pretty good. And this was one of the first games they used me at defensive end. And my job was, on the option, was to whack the quarterback. Well, I enjoyed that job immensely. And they were running an option by their bench, and I just lit this guy up. Helmet came off, this and that. And about 30 guys on their bench like started screaming. And we're gonna get, you're dead. We got your number. No 16. I go, hey, do you guys play? I go, if you're in the game, come see me. I'll be out here. I had so much fun and met so many good people.
Did you have any aspirations of going back to the following year or the year after that, going to other getting NFL tryouts and going to other NFL camps, or maybe venturing into the Canadian Football League, and a couple years down the road after that, the USFL?
We let's see. I completed my internship at Mesa in the Denver area, and the Broncos let me work out at their facility. And I got a call from my parents that they were sending starting a new semi-pro team in the Tonawandas. And this coach and owner had been calling my parents, well, is he coming home? And we'd really like to have him. And this coach was sort of like a gypsy of the semi-pro leagues, but he got a lot of guys into the pros. So I came back home, and I played with the Tonawanda Cougars in 1980, and that opened a lot of doors for me. I had a tryout. I was with the Kansas City Chiefs for 3 weeks in their voluntary minicamp. I signed a 2-year contract with the Dolphins. I got a call from the New England Patriots and went up there for 3 days. So, again, with the Dolphins, in a preseason game, I get my shoulder whacked out of place on a kickoff against the Saints. So basically, to say my season was done, I recouped a year, and there was the Buffalo Geminis, the Niagara Falls Spartans, and a couple of my friends from high school were playing on the Spartans, and Gene Zinni was the coach. He had coached NT for a bit afterwards, and he also was like on UB's championship team in the 50s. The Geminis wanted me really bad, and I told the coach, I said, it's probably going to be my last year. I want to play it with the guys lifelong friends. And the coach understood, and he wished me luck. The Tonawanda Cougars team, I don't know how this coach did it, but he was a magician of finding talent. We used to practice behind Bishop Gibbons before the apartments were put in there. And he brought this kid in from Rochester, Scott Burke, who played with the Bills as a defensive end for 5 years, and he went to Pittsburgh. And then he played on the Silver Bullets, a softball team that were sponsored by Coors Light and Steel Bats. And Scott Burke was a tight end that was 6'6", 265, and ran a 4.5 40. And the Bills saw him, and they said, "Oh, we want you at defensive end. We need edge rush with your size and speed," because they were pretty much set their tight ends. So we actually won, the Cougars actually won the Eastern U.S. title that year, and we're supposed to play for the national championship, and our owner folded the team because he had sold his sporting goods store and ran out of funds and said, we're done. And we tried to raise money because we had to host the game and we had to pay travel and expenses for the other team, and our efforts fell short, and we were one game away from being national champs, which really hurt. But I did have offers and feelers from the USFL, but when I found out all the details, as opposed, say, to the NFL, the NFL, if you were injured, you would continue to get your stipend or injury payment. In the USFL, if you were injured, you better have health insurance, because they didn't pay for anything after the initial treatment. They didn't pay for any therapy. You were just cut. And a great coach I had with the Geminis and Ron Hopkins. We would talk, and he would come to see our flag football games when we were playing for Kleenex. He would come out to Lockport, watch us play, and he goes, Stan, you're having so much fun. He goes, you know, you were one of the few guys I ever met that, you know, your heart wore out your body. It's like your body let you down. You just, you know, you were 1/10 of 1% of, you know, making that, you know, final cut. But he said, you got nothing to be ashamed for. Him and Rick Casada gave me some Canadian contacts also. And he said, you guys, you had nothing to be ashamed of. You gave it your best. And that's all that counts.
How hard was it for you to transition to taking off the pads and the helmet?
It's still hard today. I watch games, and it's like I got muscle reflex memory. Like, okay, drop the shoulder. Okay, you know, that passed with time. But
you got into coaching as well too. You coached guys like Ted Barrett before he moved away, and he speaks highly of you and fondly of you even to this day. And then after assistant coaching, you became an official.
Yes.
You also did write a letter to Vern Gagne and the American Wrestling Alliance to see if you could become a professional wrestler, which is something that people typically don't do. I take it you had aspirations to become a professional wrestler as well too.
Well, we used to train, weightlift at this Tonawanda Sports Fitness Center. We were there one Saturday afternoon, and these two big blondes came in, and they were pretty beefy, and I don't know if they was real tan or artificial tan, and gosh, I know these guys. And one was a former wrestler from UB, and I think they used to wrestle as the Fargo brothers. And they saw, and I still had my size. I'd got up to like 245 and pretty still strong on the bench and the squat. Oh, how much can you, let's see how tough you are. And then they saw me do some dips with like 150 pounds attached to myself, and did them for 8. And they said, ooh. And they go, hey, have you ever considered wrestling? And I go, no. And then, and you were working for Victory Magazine and sending all this stuff from Kleenex. And I said, hey, and I also wrote the Destroyer a letter, and he sent me a postcard because he was in Japan. And
Dick Beyer, yes.
Yeah.
The late, great Dick Beyer,
Yes.
great guy.
And he said, I'll be back home in the States in 3 months. He goes, give me a call. He goes, I got a ring set up in my barn. He goes, we'll work you out and see what we can do. And at that time, I mean, I had like 0 opportunities on the horizon, and like 2 weeks before that, I got 3 great job offers. And I took one and I stuck with it. And then this was like right around 87 when NFL strike came on. Randy Ribick was coaching, or was equipment manager, and I think Marv Levy was with the Bills. And now Marv Levy knew me because he was the head coach of Kansas City when I was with them. And we'd go up to his office and talk, because he also coached at a school in New Mexico that my college team played, New Mexico Highlands. That's where he started his college career. And we would BS about the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference and the great folks we had out there. And but Randy called me and said, Stan, they need a long snapper and a linebacker. Why don't you come out? And I had just started this really great job at Buffalo General, and I can't say, well, I gotta take 3 months off. I mean, I was still on probation, and they would have given it to somebody else. But it was a super job, and it was with my degree that I went to school for, therapeutic recreation. So I was working with handicapped or mentally disabled people and kids, and so I stuck with that until I retired about 5 years ago.
Let's get back to your coaching days at NT. Ted Barrett was one of them. Who were some of the other players that you influenced and coached during that time?
Well, going through some stuff the other day, I found some index cards that were from 1981, the year I coached, and I had my offensive and defensive lineups in there. And Mr. Barrett was my cornerback and wide receiver. Mark Lemke, Craig Yablecki was our outstanding fullback. Mark Wohl was a very good lineman. The younger Weckerman brother, who unfortunately passed away between his junior and senior year. I'm sorry, Welchoff. Yeah. We had a great bunch of guys, and I coached with Dick Yeager, and then we also worked with the varsity too. We really practiced as one unit, and then for an hour, then we broke off in a varsity and JV, so everybody was on the same page and we're running the same system.
Later on down the road, you became a football official. What pointed you in that direction?
I had transferred from Buffalo General and started working with the state of New York. And I had a 4-day work schedule. So I had a lot of time on my hands. And I was just remembering, reflecting on when I played Little League. And these refs standing there in ankle deep water, wind blowing, and getting like $6 a game. And I said, I think I want to give something back to the game. So I became an official. And I went through the Western New York Certified Football Officials Association, signed up as a candidate, went to all the classes, took the national exam, passed, and back then you had to go through a 4-year internship before you could do a varsity game. Went through my 4 years, and again, I tried to learn something like every day, everywhere, every person, that somebody has something you can learn from. And we had fantastic. I mean, Dick Grapes was retired, but was still part of the organization. And Mike Binkowski, who's now the president, I was on his crew for like 7 years, and we worked super. But they were having trouble getting officials. They were having trouble because every school put in lights for Friday night lights, and it was sort of economical because they didn't have to pay extra staff for Saturdays, so there were less Saturday games, or if there were games on Saturdays, they were in the morning or early afternoon, so they wouldn't have to burn the lights. So, but I had more fun doing that, and guys didn't want to do Little League because, well, it can be really intimidating. Coaches yell and scream, but mostly they're frustrated high school athletes who never even put on the stuff. They're just good at yelling. But the parents were a bit psychotic at times. We would charge on the field and but I would say, well, give me your younger guys, and we'll go do 3 Little League games at LaSalle Park. And I told these guys, okay, you work the flanks. I says, don't take any crap. All you gotta do is take that flag out and drop it. And we go over, give them a warning, and say, next time the flag comes out, that's 15 yards. You don't want to cost your team that. It was just like being able to communicate people, and if someone's ultra excited, you give them a second to calm down, and you try to explain. But problem with Little League fans are, they see pro rules and they see college rules, and that ball was uncatchable and this and that. And we go by high school rules, and there's no such rule in high school. You grab a guy and the ball's in the air, that's either holding or pass interference, whether it's 10 yards short or 10 yards over his head.
I want to talk about you being inducted in 1988 in the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame. You go in with John Laper and John Montesani. What's that mean to you, being in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, gosh. My 2 biggest games in high school that mean the most, the Kenny's game, which was Hall of Fame night on a Thursday night. The season before, we're playing Jamestown, and we have a mediocre record in Jamestown. Jamestown is like 6-1, and they have a punt returner running back named Manny Leeper, who set all kinds of college records, track star, who's from Jamestown. Yeah. And Mark Ciesica made a game-saving tackle. He broke a punt return loose, and we were only up by 4. And C's caught him from behind and just was able to swipe the back of his heel to where he tripped himself, or otherwise it would have been 6 points. We would have lost that game. The Hall of Fame was, they put on, the wonderful banquet for us. I still have pictures of like myself, Edgy Skavinsky, Pete Sarratori, Kenya, Ronnie Prohaska, Joey Ogiba. We're all in suits, and me and Billy are up there handing awards out or receiving awards, and it was it's something that you dream of, and it's too bad like the kids of today didn't grow up in the same era of learning to play and trying to be the best you can be. And I think Joe Montana said, if I was going to have my son play football, I would have him play every sport imaginable. Be the best athlete you can be.
Your brother Steve is now in the Hall of Fame. Went in a couple of years ago. What does that mean to you to have the Rusin brothers in the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame?
Oh, that means a tremendous amount to me, because as my little brother, he always hung around with me and went to all our neighborhood games and was actually got his start like playing when my first year of Tyrol was his first year of Tyrol. And I sent him a picture. I still have the program from 1970, the Tyrol. And we had so many kids in NT, they had 6 teams of like 40 guys or more. So I mean, that's a lot of kids and a lot of coaches and a lot of work by the families and agencies and support. And to have my brother in is pretty special.
Looking at your body of work all these years, Stan, from being a scrawny kid going to Bishop Gibbons to where you are today, regarding your football career, would you do anything different? Or do you have any regrets?
Well, the regrets were that the injuries, but who could foresee them, and I would think, well, maybe if I trained harder, and then I had like Tom Haney, professional trainer, sports and fitness director at Haney's, would tell me, you might want to like tone your workouts down. Maybe you're taxing your body too hard. I really don't have any regrets. Because I was taught, do the best you can, as much as you can, and no one can criticize you for anything.
What advice do you have to today's football players and athletes?
Set goals. Don't take any plays off. Practice like you play. And be the best person you can be.
We've talked about a lot of things in this conversation. What would you like to talk about that I haven't brought up?
Well, the other sports can be just as important, and even the recreation sports. I mean, to the kids today, get out there, try lacrosse, try anything that's got to do with running. Or if you're not that good of a runner, try volleyball, try broomball, try, you'll find your niche. And by process of elimination, you'll find something you enjoy. And even if you're not good at it, stick with it. Don't give up on yourself too easily.
One final question. In the history of North Tonawanda athletics, how should Stan Rusin be remembered?
He gave it his all.
Stan Rusin, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, my friend. It's good seeing you. I wish you well, best of health to you, and everything else going forward in the next chapters of your life. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Eddie.